Yeah, yeah. Thanks everyone for being here. As David said, I'm actually back in the States for another week or so, and coming at you live from Sioux City, Iowa, um, at the moment. Yeah, looking to pull it together, pulling it all together here with you. As you know, the past 4 webinars we've had have focused on individual components of the 4-component model, and today we want to, draw it all together, provide a little synthesis, and yeah, and hopefully clarify any kind of final issues here. So as you can see here, we'll talk about some objectives, but really want to do a brief review of the FCM itself and an example of what that would look like in action, and then talk about the curriculum that we've presented, right? So we've got these 4 big lessons, each having a set of core questions and some key concepts and some instructional activities to go along with it. So that'll be the bulk of this webinar today, is really making sure that we have a nice review of everything that we've been talking about over the past 4 webinars. And then a couple of other issues that we wanted to, or ideas that we wanted to put in the air, as it were. One is this distinction between ethics and morals. We've been using them interchangeably, and a lot of people do, but just for your own edification and perhaps that of your students if they ask, there is some differences there, and so we'll talk about that. And then finally, I really want to talk about an idea that David and I had when we first sort of conceived this project, and an idea concerning how do we introduce this to our students, and one way to do this is to think about how professionals, like professional writers, historians, and scientists sort of behave, and then asking our students, essentially, as our history students or our writing students or science students, to take on that role. And behave in a way in accord with the ethics of the professions. So we'll share some examples from different professional associations, and then we'll wrap it up, and we'll have our final webinar on June 3rd. So without further ado, let's move forward. Yeah, we want to refine understanding of the full model, and hopefully thereby increasing your ability to apply the full model to ethical dilemmas that particularly focus on academic integrity, and in doing so, increasing everybody's understanding of how they might use this in their classrooms, and set you on your way to developing your own or extending the lesson templates and plans that we've developed. But really it's about, having hopefully, after today's seminar, you'll have a real vision of what this might look like in your own classroom. So let's go forward. All right, so we're all familiar with with the 4 components right now, and we've seen this slide a dozen times. The high road versus the low road, and of course we want to get students acting on the high road. Our own research has shown that that sometimes students notice that they're in a moral situation, and they might even make a principled judgment, but then when it comes to that commitment part, they find themselves on the low road, and then the commitment action part. So the idea with these 4, if you think of them as a linear thing and flowing, is getting students on that high road and staying on the high road is the goal. Then of course this version of it that I like a lot, our colorful one with the symbols, and really kind of lays out a lot of the conceptual at the bottom there. Are you guys seeing my arrow here, David, or isn't there like a pointer arrow I can use? Sorry to interrupt this.
Your arrow does show up on my screen. Your arrow does show up.
Okay. Okay, good. All right, so so this is just, again, another sort of version of it all, and the desired response, of course, being the sort of the high road, if you will. All right, how's that not working? Okay, And what that might look like in an application, in sort of brief, as a brief example, you know, a very small sort of dilemma situation might be a friend asked me to tell him test questions, you know, during lunch, you know, for an exam that he has next hour. Maybe I had the exam earlier. You know, what would that look like? You know, it might look like. Oh, okay, that's interesting. It might look like what the desired response for us would be that, you know, that a student recognizes, hey, this is a moral situation, issues of fairness, loyalty, authority, sanctity, you know, perhaps even are involved. That you know, and in this situation, you know, that one shouldn't share test questions because it's not fair to other students. Also violates the trust that teachers sort of give when they're you know, reusing the same test during different sections. And then finally, you know, not finally, but then making the commitment that, you know, that I won't do so. I won't share these test questions because of my commitment to fairness. And here, importantly, of course, you know, not allowing one's friendship to rationalize cheating. And then finally, of course, carrying out that commitment and not sharing the test questions. But we want students, of course, we recognize that, yeah, that, you know, that they're not necessarily going to don't have to just refuse. They can offer another way of helping. In this case, maybe helping the students study over lunch, offering some way to support them so that they can be successful on their own in an honest way. So that would be sort of the ideal or the desired kind of set of responses that might flow from you know, from a dilemma situation like this. All right. So really, this is the part now where I really want to break it down in brief and really overview, you know, review the whole curriculum, the whole Achieving with Integrity curriculum, if you will, and each of the four components. So yeah, I really want to do this because I think there's still some kind of confusion about, well, what is it we're teaching? What is it that we need to do? And so you know, this PowerPoint I hope really helps. And the next slides in particular. So for each of the components, you're going to see I've created a slide like this where I identify, you know, what are the core questions that we're concerned with, and then, you know, what are the key concepts we're working with. So this is the content that you're going to be really, to the extent that you're teaching here, you know, it'll be this. The rest of the time, you're more or less, as the teacher, you're being a constructivist teacher, right? You're the facilitator, the kind of the guide on the side. You know, for the bulk of these activities, helping students complete, you know, in this case for the moral awareness, it's the AMAP. So that's the primary instructional activity. Now again, you know, you might choose to build on this in different ways and so forth. But the main idea is that, you know, we're asking students to think about these core questions. We're presenting them with, you know, with a framework for thinking about, in this case, you know, what's moral. In this case, it's Haidt's intuitive ethics. And then finally, you know, we have a protocol, an instructional activity that helps them do both, helps them think about those core questions and use using some concepts, some key concepts that relate to it. So as you know, and as you've seen before, we have this kind of, here's where, you know, you don't have to present this part to students if you don't want. This is more for you and thinking about, you know, what are we talking about when we're talking about, you know, awareness. And the idea here is, right, is that we've got both perception, you know, attention and perception. We want, what the AMAP really is designed to do, right, is to have students focus their attention on a situation so that they can thus perceive the issues. And the AMAP then, you know, literally focuses, you know, tells them to focus on the, you know, is there issues of care, issues of fairness, loyalty, authority, so on, you know, involved in the situation. So that's what we're really doing here, and what the AMAP to do is to help students attend and perceive. Those are the key mechanisms for raising moral awareness. And the key concepts then are coming out of Haidt's moral foundations theory. There's a lot of different, right, theories and frameworks for defining what's moral. I think, as we said at the beginning of this seminar series, we chose this one because It sort of is the most popular current in psychological theory. It's rooted in you know, in a multicultural kind of perspective. It doesn't really, even if I've ordered them, you know, 1, 2, and 3 here, Haidt is very, you know, keen to say that this is, you know, that one is not better than the other. There are differences between cultures and even people in different political ends of the spectrum in terms of how they might order these things. But the theory itself is that you know, these are all moral values or ethical values that are essentially bred in the bone, right? They evolved from our you know, our highly social origins as a species, and they help regulate our behavior because, of course, we as a human animal, we have a very selfish side to us. We want to make sure of our own survival and productivity, if not reproductivity, and that can cause us to be a bit selfish. And evolution has sort of tried to guard against that, you know, through the evolution of these more pro-social, if you will, moral, ethical values. So these 5, you know, are you know, we've chosen them basically as the framework for helping define, you know, what moral is, and it's the one that we're suggesting you use with your students. So that way too, you're not saying, hey, these are my morals or these are somebody else's morals. You're very clear that this is a framework. This is one way of thinking about it, and you know, asking students to, you know, use it on the AMAP. They don't have to ultimately adopt it, believe in it, whatever. They might have their own, you know, moral system and so forth. But here we are presenting this one as for instructional purposes. And so the AMAP, in essence, you know, we're going to boil these down to just 3 steps for today. You know, the 3 critical steps of stating a situation, analyzing the problem, identifying interested parties. And you by now have the protocols that do that. And on the protocol, students are given, you know, juxtaposing Haidt's 5 intuitive ethics, so that as they go through and looking at a dilemma situation, they can easily sort of filter it through and think about the current dilemma and how these ethics might play a role in the situation. So you know, with that done, we move into the judgment phase and the core questions about what's right and what one should do in a given situation. And here we are still keeping it abstract, right? We're talking about sort of one in general. David would probably like to say, you know, well, it would be an ethical one, but I think that's implicit in the should, right? The should is this, should language is moral language. It's loaded. It has, it's implicit there that what one should do, you know, would be what's the right thing, right? And in our theory here comes out of Kohlberg, or even really neo, you know, post-Kohlbergian sort of notions of levels of reasoning. We call them lenses as well. Kohlberg called them levels, but they're lenses. They're ways. Levels and lenses are the ways we see you know, see an issue and reason through it. And the primary protocol then is the EDMA. So here we are, and looking at our key mechanisms. The idea is that you know, the first thing that really happens, let me go back, the first thing that really happens is that we often form a judgment intuitively. You know, once we realize that we're in a moral situation, oftentimes what we feel is right is something that's we can't even articulate yet cognitively. It's intuitive. We feel it in our gut, right, or our heart, and we say that, oh, you know, one shouldn't do that. And usually those intuitions are great guides. They really do. They hit it on the head. And then what's, you know, and everything is good. However, it is worth pausing for a moment and really thinking about it and using some reasoning to make sure. So there are some limitations of intuition. I'm not going to get any details of that now, but the idea is we want to recognize that intuitions matter, and they often are the thing that gives us our first sense of what is right and what one should do in a situation. but we want students to pause and then actively reason about it. And the reasoning model we want to use here, of course, is Kohlberg's 3 levels. We want them, I'm sorry, the slides got a lot more on than I thought. So these are this conscious deliberative process of reasoning and weighing out different competing considerations. In doing so, there are these 3 lenses or levels that we've been talking about. At the most basic being reasoning with sort of our own personal interest in mind. This is sort of the individual existential, goal of sort of avoiding pain and maximizing one's pleasure. Developmentally speaking, it's the one that is, that we can expect in childhood. As we emerge into adolescence, social conventions and conventional reasoning becomes more dominant, and that is using the customs, norms, rules, and laws of our society. So in this way, conventional reasoning is cultural and descriptive. It is not until really late adolescence and even into adulthood where people fully appreciate moral principles. These are more abstract. They're meant to be universal and prescriptive, and they're things that concerns of fairness, of harm versus care, and also, of course, from Haidt's perspective, the loyalty, authority, sanctity. These are the moral domain. And we ultimately want students, we can expect students to be able to comfortably reason with principled, with personal interests and social conventions. The goal developmentally for us in this project is to get kids thinking about and comfortable with reasoning with moral principles. So that's the big goal of this particular lesson. And then to help them do that, of course, is the EDMA, the ethical decision and making activity. And here we've distilled it into the three activity, the 3 steps of listening, deciding, and explaining. You'll recall in the full activity that you'll do with students in your classroom, it almost is they do this by themselves first, these 3 steps, and then they kind of do it together, so that there's some dialogue and social construction. This is really important for Kohlberg and other sort of developmentalists, is that you want students talking and exchanging ideas and getting exposed to, hopefully, different reasoning and maybe even more sophisticated reasoning than their own. So, but these are the 3, critical steps. And then we can move on then to moral commitment. The core questions here is sort of the broad one of why be good. That's right. That's the motivational question. Is why why do it? But the focus that we're going to really want to hone in on is individual responsibility and the question of am I responsible? So now that I've just made this judgment that that one shouldn't do X, then well, now that I'm the one, to what extent am I responsible for not doing X? The biggest thing we found in the research to date, and this is true not only in academic cheating but in all kinds of behaviors concerning moral or pro-social behaviors, is this tendency to rationalize. So oftentimes, people, they see they're in a moral situation, they make the right judgment that it's wrong to do X, but they tend to rationalize, often in pursuit of their own personal interest. They tend to rationalize the opposite behavior, the wrong behavior. And so Bandura's theory, and Bandura's is not the only one. There's many other theories. There's John Gibbs has a theory what he calls them social cognitive distortions. It's like sociologists have called them neutralization techniques. So either way, Freud called them ego defense mechanisms. The idea here is that a lot of times human beings do things that they know to be wrong, and we don't want to feel bad about it. So we're trying to disengage that sense of personal responsibility, hopefully using the VIPA, which is the primary instructional activity of this component, we can expose those rationalizations and help students prioritize the right thing. And of course, we illustrated that here with a couple of key mechanisms of basically prioritizing the moral values over other values, and then of course, preventing the activation of the rationalizations. And the prioritizing of values means, you know, the fairness, the honesty, or care, do no harm kind of thing, over one's own personal interest of getting ahead, or the more social conventional interest of going along and kind of getting along with others. And so that's hard to do, right? Especially the latter. You know, a lot of times people just go along with the crowd, right? And you don't question authority or don't question the group. You know, and if you do so, you know, it can only, you know, it could bring problems for you, right? It's the whistleblower problem, you know, and you know, it can be very difficult. But secondly is really resisting those temptations too. And here I use that word, you know, neutralize here, but that's neutralize, disengage, any of those things that basically say, hey, you know, in the end, it's really not my fault, you know, or not my responsibility. And it's, you know, it's the teacher's fault or it's the situation. And so we gave you a list of these kind of, Bandura's mechanisms. It's a little complicated. You know, the main thing is to focus on the ones in the red, particularly the top two. You know, these are the ones that are the most common. The displacement of responsibility to the teacher in particular, or you know, or to a friend or something, or the diffusion of responsibility, saying that, you know, hey, everybody else is doing it. You know, if I don't do it, then I'm losing. You know, then I'm playing a patsy or something. And just there's these other ones certainly matter and play a role. But if you had to focus on just a couple, it certainly would be the top two, because those are the ones that are most common, particularly with respect to academic cheating. Let's see, and this VIPA, the three key steps here are having them first decide what they should do, what you would do. Because remember, where we left off, it was a judgment and a reasoning about what one should do. So that's why we want with this activity in particular, and with all the activities, they're meant to build on each other. So you want to start with the review of the EDMA, and then pick it up from there. And of course, the templates and protocols we've provided do that for you. So so if you're using those, it won't be a problem. We want to, then of course check the integrity, making sure that the decision is free of rationalizations, so there's no displacement or there's no diffusion of responsibility. And then finally, we want them to really, consciously affirm the values and the goals that they are upholding. And where applicable, the ones that they're letting go. I think the really big tension there is the B. It's to pursue fairness, and doing the right thing of not cheating, and because it'd be unfair to others, sometimes means that that from your friend's perspective at least, you're not being a loyal friend. A good friend would give them that test question and answer, and wouldn't just simply offer to help them study more, right? At least that's how oftentimes peers might think about it. Okay, and we get to the fourth and final component of action. How do we do it? And what kinds of skills and will are needed? And this distinction here between performance versus moral character. And as we talked about it a bit, it's not just a matter of ego strength, which would be sort of moral character, right? It's also about having the skills, the performance skills needed to complete an action. And so the SWOP helps identify that, and asking students, what skills are needed. Let's go here. So this performance character is about, the character itself part of the four is about initiative, discipline, perseverance, teamwork. But no, those things aren't inherently moral, right, in and of themselves. If you think about, to use the classic examples that others have, Hitler or even Osama bin Laden, right? These are people that had initiative, discipline, perseverance, to basically pursue something doggedly. But we would say that maybe it lacked, to a certain degree, sort of moral character, and because of, in some ultimate sense, at least from our perspective, those behaviors they were pursuing, weren't ethical ones. They weren't really rooted in a kind of, fairness, respect for human dignity and worth. So we have a couple of I think we didn't put in the slides here, but and again it'll vary. Maybe for all of you, even for the science teachers, maybe part of the skill part is teaching them, because of their writing papers, not plagiarizing, right? And what that means, and developing some skills for properly paraphrasing, or if not properly paraphrasing, at least how proper attribution techniques, so how to cite various types of sources and so forth. You'll have to probably go back to that PowerPoint to get those slides and also the template. But here, we want students to sort of at this step to take an inventory, as it were, right, of what are the academic skills I'll need to be successful in an honest way, to do the right thing. What about the social skills? If I know I'm going to be facing some temptations from others to help them, then how can I reframe that in a way that helps reframe it in a way that where I'm not I don't help my friend cheat, but I still help them in some way, and I'm even using sort of nonverbal signals that you're not willing to go along with cheating. I think David used a nice example from one of our schools in a previous project where they had those Lance Armstrong type bands, but they had like an Achieving with Integrity on it instead, and the school had used that as part of their integrity campaign, and students could simply hold up their arm as a way of non-verbally communicating that they didn't want somebody else copying off their test during an exam. I think was one of the concrete examples we had. Finally, this exercising the will. This is the ego strength of, it's really hard sometimes to stay the course, right, of the right course of action, and so you really have to, sometimes take a moment to breathe, think, and feel, as it were, as we summarize it here, and not get swept away in the moment of temptation. So we want students to be conscious of all these things. I mean. And our idea here in laying it out and all of these steps is not that somebody's going to do, in every moral situation, you're not going to stop and basically, break out all these 4 sets of protocols and walk through every step. But the key thing to learning that we know from studies, decades now of studies of learning, is that first you have to make those steps conscious. And you have to provide practice for using them. And that way students can begin to internalize them so that it becomes more automatic. And what we're trying to do here is to provide that exposure. And yeah, it seems a bit cumbersome, and it's like, well, you have to go through all these steps and so forth. But that's how you do it. You have to first make it explicit before it can become implicit. Before it can become, it has to be external, brought in, practiced, before it can become internalized, and then, automatically part of one's repertoire, as it were. So that's sort of the big goal there.
And Jason, if I could
just want to say a couple of things about please. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention then on the lesson template, you'll be seeing that basically we're going to be asking you to help the students practice just what Jason talked about. There'll be a case, and on the case it's just going to there will be reminders of the 4 larger components, and then the students will reflect on how they responded to them in light of the 12 steps that Jason just outlined. So yeah, this is the last lesson, as it were, before we would hope, you know, you could use these to practice throughout your classes, but the student reflection on the 12 steps in this next lesson template is really the heart of what we'd like to see practiced going forward with this particular lesson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's clear in that template in the activity appendix that David's just referencing. Yeah, that it's not, you know, every time you're not going to be going through all of the sub steps, but it's, you know, it is this, you know, this is how we got to teach it, though, I think, to make it work. But so let me say, you know, just as a couple of things here, this distinction between ethics and morals, and then finally ethics in the professions. You know, we purposely, of course, when we started this project, solicited, you know, we were looking for teachers in English and literature and history, social studies, and any of the sciences, because of we felt that those were the best fit for doing the project we wanted to do. Math was just a little bit tougher to sort of make it work. So so we really wanted to focus on writing and history and science as disciplines. But first this distinction between ethics and morals. As you can see, I grabbed this from this website just the other day, and thought it did a fair enough job as when I learned it back in grad school. Essentially, you know, when people talk about ethics, they're usually talking about you know, a social system. You know, the profession, you know, ethics in the profession. So it's something that's external, kind of, to the self, and you know, we do it because society or some governing body has said that, you know, this is these are what the code of ethics for our profession is, and that contrasts a bit, right, with how, you know, how we think about moral as being something that's a little more subjective, a little more personal. It's something that that varies among individuals, and therefore is kind of internal. And you know, and the reasons for, you know, doing these things, you know, tend to be a little bit different. And you can sort of look at them, you know, look at this sort of yourself and think about it. However, in most cases, you know, I think when it comes to ethics and morals, and we're talking about academic integrity, right? The fact is that you know, that there's some overlap here. You know, ethically speaking, academic integrity is wrong because of every one of your schools, and just about, you know, and every other school has rules, formal rules and codes against cheating. And so in that sense, it's ethical. It's part of the social system of the school. But it's also, you know, these are issues of fairness. And that, you know, itself, I think, is sort of, you know, more of a moral thing, and of fairness, or at the individual, sort of, you know, goodness, and, you know, sanctity, purity, as Haidt might say it, you know, and somebody, you know, somebody who you know, if you're a cheater, you know, right, that's not something you want to be, because that suggests that you're somebody who's not trustworthy, that you will, you know, do things to advance your own interest, even when they are, you know, they cost, even when they come at the cost of others' interest. So in that sense, academic integrity, there's both sort of ethical and moral reasons why it's problematic and wrong. So you know, again, you can do with that what you like. You know, if you know, I just wanted to at least have a slide for you there that you could have in your own, you know, PowerPoint deck that would help make a distinction. If you felt that an important one, or if your students asked, or you just wanted to clarify that at the outset. I've often just used the two interchangeably because usually when I'm talking about them, actually either term would do. It's both. It's, you know, academic integrity, as I just said, is both an ethical and a moral issue, as far as I'm concerned. I I wanted to, I actually cut and paste these questions. I sort of formatted them differently, but these are actually from an early proposal that David and I wrote to get funding for this project. In the project description of the grant that we wrote, I wanted this was the way I described or what we wrote to sort of as an in saying, like, you know, how is integrity, particularly academic integrity, manifest in the lives of writers, historians, and scientists? In other words, what does it mean to achieve with integrity as a writer, historian, or a scientist? So what do they do or refrain from doing that honors the values and principles or ethics of their profession, right? And then we further went on that, and I'm highlighting that. I highlighted that because I think these are things that you could begin this diet. You know, we want you to do this right at the beginning of the year to get students off on the right foot. So come next fall, you know, as you begin to launch into your, you know, into the curriculum, it might be, you could begin to have this conversation with students by asking these questions. And David and I talked about this a little bit last night, because you know, when I got trained as a teacher, as a middle school social studies teacher, it was, you know, in the early 90s, and it was still in David, I think for David he said it was in the 80s, and it was this, you know, this constructivist notion is that I wasn't supposed to just go in and teach kids history. I was supposed to make them little historians, right? I was supposed to engage them in the act of understanding and constructing history for themselves, and not just simply passively listening to me talk about history. And so, and the same would be true for English and literature, and for any kind of science, is that, you know, to the extent possible, you know, we want to give the kids standing and status, as we used to talk about it, as a writer or a scientist, and having them, you know, do the work and the kind of thinking that you know, that is prominent among professionals in the discipline. And so if that's still true for you, and that's still, and that, again, this is really kind of almost a philosophy, right, of teaching. If that's part of your philosophy, then this will work really easily. If it's not part of your philosophy, it might be a little tougher. It might, you know, but the idea is that if that's how you think about it, you want kids in your class thinking about, you know, how, you know, if you're an English literature teacher, you know, thinking about what a writer does and how they do it, how they do their craft, or an historian or a scientist, then I think this is a natural. I think it works. You know, and so, and then of course the latter two questions there that aren't highlighted are ones that we put in the grant, because we said, you know, could secondary teachers of English, history, science engage their students in meaningful discussions of these questions, and would such a dialogue, or could such a dialogue, you know, promote students' own understanding and commitment to achieving with integrity. So over the weekend, as I was mucking around, I was looking around, and there's tons of different language associations, and the MLA is, of course, a pretty famous one. And so I went to the MLA's website, and down below, and there's all kinds of, and it's called the Statement of Professional Ethics on their website. And in the preamble, I mean, it's a big statement, and a lot of it's about, you know, teaching and learning and respect for students and some other things. But then this preamble, bullet 3 in the preamble, and then the footnote 2 is there was a few more bullets there, but so I was being kind of somewhat selective in my cutting and pasting. But this is verbatim stuff here, so I thought this was really nice. And again, so if you're an English or a literature teacher, this might be the way in which you start to talk about, you know, what does it mean to be a professional writer? You know, what you know, how do they achieve with integrity? What is part of their code? So so that's again, you could use another one. If you have another language association or something and has a good code of ethics and you want to use it, then feel free. This is obviously just a suggestion. Similarly, there are numerous historical associations. I picked this one. I looked at several. I picked this one because it was the most straightforward. The American Historical Association and their statement on standards of professional conduct from 2005. Number 2, shared values of historians, and where the ellipses are, I was cutting and pasting, obviously, and so there's some verbiage in between. However, the bold is still the same. So you can go to that website and look at it. But there it is. You know, integrity with historical record. Do not fabricate evidence. Forgery and fraud violate the most basic foundations. You know, so on and so forth. So really very, very clear statement here. Similarly, many science associations. You can get one for if you're a chemist. There's one for chemistry, biology, all kinds. I ended up landing on the National Academy of Sciences website, again, because of, they spelled it out a little bit different, so they talk about it as 3 sets of obligations, and I thought these were applicable, but particularly the first, the importance was science, I think, and the issue we talk about, which would be sort of like data fabrication, in that Deepak Das case that we used, and some other examples, but the idea here, of course, is that science is only as good as as it is truthful, and there's a lot of trust placed in scientists, and we count on them to not be fabricating data and doing other things that would really derail the broader purposes, particularly number 3. You get down to sort of the the effects on society and the service to the public, and ever more so today. I mean, science is incredibly important to our health and well-being as individuals and societies. So so again, you could probably find others, depending on maybe what type of science you're teaching, that might be a little bit more focused and more applicable. So I encourage you to search that out if so. But I did want to present these at least as additional, this whole idea as additional food for thought, and these as additional resources for you to consider. As David already referenced, we'll have that template. I imagine it'll be up, if not later today, tomorrow, with and you'll this following the same 4-part structure and so forth. With that said, let's go ahead and open up those mics again for the last few minutes and see if we'll have any immediate questions, comments. We do have a 6th course webinar, which we'll have totally open, right, David, as I understand it, for any Q&A.
So all the mics are on now, and yes, our final webinar will be a webinar just without a planned lesson, just an opportunity for some question and answer.
How to teach students to achieve good integrity and knowledge.
So any questions now from our participants today?
Brownies, just cut your bricks up over this.
It sounded good. It's a good summary. Just as a comment, Bob Johnson here.
Thanks, Bob.
Very helpful. Jay Pitson.
Thanks, Jay.
So any other question before we wrap up?
I think we're good.
Well, Jason, let's go on to the last slide then.
All right, let me move that. Yeah, so David, you want to mention anything here? I mean, this is the website for the blog itself. Everything's on there, and then some breakdown. For additional resources beyond it, you could go to the C's website, but everything should be on our blog, and hopefully everybody's got access to that now and able to use it effectively. If not, definitely follow up with David.
So
David, anything else you want to?
No, we'll be getting this particular webinar up, and the PowerPoint also located on the blog. And tomorrow I'll be forwarding both the links, the direct links. If you're still having webinar or blog issues, you'll get the links directly from me. But again, you'll see that the blog has all these links through the individual webinars. And Jason and I are just extremely pleased with our collaboration, and we're hoping then by June 3rd to be seeing more of your lessons coming in, and if we can have any question times. But our team meetings have been very productive, I've thought, as well, and happy to host another team meeting before school gets out here. And in our June 3rd meeting, about the only content we'll probably share is just looking at the timeline for how things will fire up in the fall.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
sounds good.
Terrific.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. I'll stop the recording now and look forward to getting back in touch on June 3rd.
Thank you. Feel better for students.
Thank you all.
And Dave, this is Granch. We'll see you.